Hey friends, it's Tim here again from Black Swamp Percussion, and you're listening to episode 20 of the Black Swamp Podcast. As always, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and have fun exploring our growing collection of episodes. We've had some great conversations with BSP artists and educators like Todd Meehan, Andrea Vinay, Matthew Lau, Adam Hopper, and several more over the last year. So this next episode is somewhat of a pod swap or podcast co-op with Josh Quillen of So Percussion. Jamel and I sat down a few weeks ago and recorded a conversation with Josh, which he just featured on his Concert Honesty podcast. If you're not familiar with Josh's podcast, you should definitely check it out. He's been killing it the last few months, releasing 100 plus episodes alone during his home quarantine and subsequent months. This includes an entire Corona Cast series with a super diverse collection of percussionists and educators, and this is what's great about Josh's podcast. He's able to comfortably talk with almost anyone about any subject. It's almost like you're his best friend for an hour and a half or so during the conversation. So find Concert Honesty wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe, and start digging in. We'll throw a link in our show notes. So Percussion has been an official BSP ensemble for several years, but I've known Josh well before that, as we're both University of Akron grads, go Zips. Although we never officially crossed paths at school, as I'm a few years older, we've ended up connecting many times at PASIC, where our reputations preceded us. Besides being a world-class percussion quartet, I also wanted to call attention to So Percussion's ongoing dedication to both education and serving their community. This includes an annual food packing event held in tandem with their SOC Percussion Institute every summer. SOC participants, along with Josh, Eric, Adam, and Jason, spend an afternoon packing meals for Princeton area organizations like the Mercer County Crisis Center. The quartet is also very conscious about sustainability, contributing to Native Energy to help offset their touring carbon footprint. To learn more about Native Energy, their carbon offset work, and how you can participate, follow the link in our show notes. So let's keep it moving with our conversation with Josh. This isn't a typical BSP podcast, by the way. It's pretty much just Jamel, Josh, and I riffing for over an hour. You'll almost learn more about Black Swamp than you do Josh, but that's because he's super curious about how we've been personally and professionally handling the pandemic, racial tensions since the killing of George Floyd, and what the landscape looks like moving forward for BSP, considering all of this. Oh, we also learn more about Josh's notorious online feud with Todd Meehan, which I find hilarious. So here we go.
Hey, you guys, look at this. We got our matching mics. Although I don't have the fancy screen, the pop filter that you guys have. I have just the one that comes with it. So
that's all right. We all have the nice one though. It's the, I guess we're official when you have the one that you kind of see when you get to see behind the scenes on radio.
It's a real podcast now.
Yeah,
it's a real legit podcast. Well, let's gavel this to order. So Jamel Taylor and Tim Church. Jamel, that's your last name, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
Great. And Tim Church, you guys teach, or you don't teach? You do. Maybe you teach, but you work.
We're constantly learning.
You're constantly learning. Your students right. As well. But you both are. You work at Black Swamp Percussion, which is based in Michigan. Is that correct?
Correct. West Michigan, just about 30 minutes west of Grand Rapids.
Right. Okay. And it's I've seen you all sort of the company grow from. I mean, when I was in undergrad, Tim Church, you were just graduating, and I remember you were playing drum set with the steel band at a Cleveland Orchestra Pops thing. The steel band was opening for it. It was like the summer. And and I was just coming to Akron that year, and so I was new to the whole thing, and I was like, "Who is this Tim Church guy? He's a wizard, you know."
Yeah, right.
And then I got to know you, and I realized I was way off base. But but that's where you and I crossed paths first, and then Larry Snyder was like, "Yeah, Tim's now working with a very small company, working out of a guy's garage in Michigan called Black Swamp," and a wood block would trickle into Larry's studio, and then a prototype tambourine, and then and now 15.
Well, Dr. Snyder always liked to stretch the truth, so It did start in a garage, but when I was there, we were a little more legit. We had an actual space manufacturing facility. But
right,
go ahead.
and I'm sort of half joking, but relative
Right.
to other companies in the industry, Black Swamp was working out of your garage. I mean, let's just. I mean, it's no different really than like So Percussion doing a start. Like there's Nexus and there's Amadinda, and then the four of us are in a garage, just kind of like, well, I guess we'll figure something out over here until somebody notices, you know. But people are noticing now, and you guys are like making some of the best stuff out there, and in terms of accessories and drums and all that stuff. But that's not necessarily. I mean, I think folks who know So Percussion know that we think your stuff is awesome, but we want to talk today about other stuff that's going on in the world and how we're dealing with it. And you know, I don't have a necessary agenda in terms of how we go. So I think we both have we all have similar questions for each other in terms of how this stuff has been going down. But
I actually have a lot of questions for Jamel. So if he and I could spend a lot of time.
I'm fine to sit here. That's totally good with me.
No,
Well,
I'm kidding.
Maybe I'll start with a question for you guys, and then we'll go from there. And wherever this hour takes us is where it takes us. But I have been thinking a lot about process personally, and like whether that is practicing your snare drum roll, or learning Scheherazade, or learning a good djembe sound, or playing a scale on a steel drum, doing a podcast, or learning to retool your business because a virus swept through and basically just blew it all down and you don't matter anymore. Like legitimately, Congress doesn't even know you exist. And so like just on a like if you're a 1 or a 0, we're all zeros all of a sudden. And
Right.
whether or not that's how we want to feel about things or how we view things, that's just a data point right now, or at least it was 5 or 6 months ago. And now we're sort of not on the tail end at all, but we're in a place now where there's more data points we can look to. And I'm kind of curious for you all, what were some of the first days like when you get notification? Eric, is it Soy? Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Soy, like
soy.
the sauce, soy sauce.
So Eric,
Or the soybean.
right. So Eric is sort of, it's an organization he founded. Maybe there's more nuance to that, but I'm just going to say Eric seems to be the guy sitting on top of this thing, and if it fails, he's going to make sure that it's his fault. Like that's sort of the vibe. I got the emails from all the institutions I worked for too, saying we were shutting down, and so I'm kind of curious, like, what was that first day like for Black Swamp and all of you sort of staring at each other when this happened?
Well, it was definitely a little crazy and a little weird because, but I mean, I give a lot of credit to Eric, like you said. I mean, he's the head of honcho, and I think he was very proactive with, with what the governor was putting out prior to. So I know the day we officially closed, March 20th was the official date. And
so.
before we got the notice from the governor, I know they were basically putting out, I don't know, press releases letting people know that this was going to be coming down the pike. And Eric, we were all working. We had full staff, everyone was working, and Eric's just like, we're going to stop what we're doing, and everyone's going to get on unemployment because the word is that we have to shut down, unless you're an essential service, we have to shut down, which, I mean, that was really key, because if you know anything about a lot of the states with their unemployment agencies and unemployment, the process, they weren't designed for millions of people to hit it at once.
Right.
So,
none of. I mean, that's the fundamentals. That's like what is in Star Wars when the first one where they're like you have to shoot the laser, like stay on course, stay on target, like
Stay on target.
There's
Stay
the
on
one
target.
little tiny soft underbelly on the entire insurance, any insurance, car insurance, flood insurance, is if the entire world gets flooded, all of a sudden no one has insurance. Like it's a little tiny bit of a Ponzi scheme of like, let's hope not everybody realizes this is all fake.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Or not
crazy
fake,
because
but it's tenuous at best.
Oh yeah, and some of the those unemployment the systems that they're using are out of date, and some of that in terms of not keeping it up to date or making it difficult. Some of that's by design, and some of that is just just poor housekeeping and keeping up for that. I mean, that's not the sexy things to have to pay for at your local level. They want millions or billions of dollars to to update from COBOL, the computer programs that they're using that were made back in the early 90s or that they and now you have all these people hitting it. But that Eric being proactive with that was key, because when everyone started filing, we were already registered and we could already because even an hour, 2 hours later, once the governor had announced what was going on, just trying to get back on to check your status, I mean, it was crashing. You couldn't get on, but because he was on top of that from just the first second, we were able to get everybody registered and work through the problems together as a team.
Amazing.
As we were because we just had everyone go to a computer in the shop. Go to your office, go to shop computer, and just start registering, and we're going to work through this together.
Well,
so that was really key.
Sorry to interrupt there, Jamel. Would you both mind, just before we get going forward, can you pull your mics down so they sort of point at this part of your chin?
Oh, yeah, not a problem.
Oh, I just can see. Oh, there's your faces. We live in a masked world anyway, and I want to see teeth, baby. I want to see teeth. Yeah. Tim, what about you? Like, I've interacted with you as on the educational side of things, and I know you do a million other things there. But what was your first day like when you got the news that this was?
Yeah, well,
happening?
I mean, we were all, like just Jamel said, we were all in the same boat. We were all there together, and we were, I think, Jamel and Eric and I kind of keeping an eye on what was happening even that morning. Mm-hmm. And it was actually Jamel doesn't have a son. Eric, he might, I don't know, unless there's something he hasn't told me. Eric has a son who lives in Colorado now, and he's actually the one that texted Eric and was like, yo, I literally just heard like Governor Whitmer's going to shut down in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And so that's when Eric literally pulled everybody together. We stood right where Jamel's sitting right now, and we're like, this is coming in like an hour. She's going to do a press conference. Let's all get on unemployment right now. So yeah, that was like super key. And then from there, honestly, it was pretty surreal. Like we all registered. That was in the morning, and it was kind of like, what do we do now? We cranked out some shipments because we knew we weren't coming back in on Tuesday,
right?
Which kind of bit us in the butt a little bit because, we're sending stuff to retailers and they're in a similar or worse position than we are, not getting paid from customers or from schools, or things aren't going through, and they're scaling down. So that's ultimately something that we had to work through 6-8 weeks later, trying to get payment from customers, stuff like that. So, but it was pretty surreal. And almost, I don't know if all the guys would say this. I know Eric and I sort of said it was sort of somewhat of a relief, I think, because there was a lot of question beforehand, like what are we going to do? Like if we don't shut down, but the world slowly starts to unwind, how are we going to handle this as a company? So it was almost like, okay, we know what we're going to do today, right now, and that's file for unemployment and go home. So,
man, I gotta say, like, it's amazing to me. I mean, I found myself having very strange moments of empathy for organizations I never thought I would. For instance, and now granted, my empathy has been adjusted as time has moved on to, I think, more appropriately be spread about to organizations that deserve it and need it and require it. But early on, like the SBA loans, the stuff that was coming from like the government, the first $3 trillion stimulus thing, like there's all those payroll protection program, the PPP program. Right. Well, Eric, and so is the guy that deals with all the grants. He deals with that sort of stuff. And so he gets in there, and thank God Eric reads fine print, because we had similar things. We're like, okay, we got to like do pay cuts. Like the first day for us, we were collaborating with 4 student composers from University of Pennsylvania, and the government starts to like, nope, we gotta shut it down. We're realizing that's going to get canceled. It's just chaos. We have not a huge fight, but like a band fight in front of these 4 students, sort of like, like everything we do is already tenuous. anyway. Like, and now all of a sudden this is all being blown up, and so we had a little bit of a band fight, and then we started to sort of like figure out like, well, okay, well, what, like, okay, Josh, you go, just make sure you know where every dollar we have like is, and know like where. That's my job. I'm gonna start figuring out what we need to cut. What we
So
can't
you're
cut.
Josh.
I'm Josh.
You're
yeah,
Josh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Eric, you go look at this thing and you get your head around this program. Jason, you start shooting up gigs, and Adam, you're on the PR tip. Like, you have got to figure out how we're gonna talk about what's happening, right? Well, Eric gets in there and he's like, I'm about to run a like 20% payroll cut across the board for all of us, including our staff, just so we can run payroll for the next 3 months. And I'm about to click the button, and Eric is like, no, don't do it. In order to get the PPP loans, we have to have everybody at full payroll. If you cut payroll, you don't have access. At least that's what the rules were telling Eric. 3 hours before the deadline to file was approaching is when the government gave Bank of America all of the paperwork. So regardless of what I think about Bank of America and their abdication of their duty to us as citizens, they got the paperwork 3 hours before we were allowed to apply for it. So of course they're not going to know what's in it, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. And so they're just like, oh my God, we've got to get this up by midnight. So they put this thing up. Eric is like, and we managed to get in the door early and get in. But it's like, when I see reports of, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse gets the bailout, but the small bakery didn't, it's like, well, yes, because the small bakery doesn't have people like Eric Chobich necessarily, or a team of lawyers looking at this stuff.
Right.
They're a small bakery. They make
were
bread,
you-
it's a little different situation. So initially, seeing that chaos play out in real time was like, oh my God. Like, do you know what Occam's razor is?
Yeah.
It's like the desire to ascribe malice to something that's just incompetence, and it's like, oh my God, like,
I thought-
like, this is not surprising to me that this is happening.
So Josh, were you in our staff meetings then the last 6 to 8 months?
Why?
Or not months, 6 to 8 weeks, because that's like exactly what we're talking about. Like how we were really fortunate, like, already Eric was on top of things, but we have a CFO, a financial officer, who's actually like really keyed into what's happening. Reading stuff online, both Eric and Kristen reading stuff online, doing webinars, keeping in touch with the bank. And we're like, if we didn't have the two of them, like we would have been lost. Just like the baker that whoever you're talking about, like doesn't stand a chance.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if when you're a small business, I don't know how you balance those new, grants and new loans and stuff that you wouldn't even know that you're eligible for a small business. Because let's think about it. When you're a small business, you're usually getting into something that's your passion. You're not getting into it to do the finances. Most people don't create a business.
Me,
unless you're,
of course, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. A CFO or accountant, you want to work with numbers. But if you're a musician or you're a baker, you chose that to work with your passion. So all these other, government, benefits that would be in there. I mean, that's stuff that you would think you would never have to look at, or and if you're a small business, you can't really afford to pay a CFO or someone a top-notch bookkeeper. I mean, but we've gotten really lucky. The bookkeeper that we have, I mean, she's fantastic, and she can file grants. She basically goes above and beyond what you would typically. I think for a lot of small businesses, you have someone who's doing your bookkeeping, and maybe they're in a couple days a week or something like that. She was in every day, and just short of making instruments, she can do anything. She's a superwoman. And then we have oversight with our CFO, who also is very innovative in how we can, make sure that we're cutting costs in the right way. But I just don't know. I mean, had we been in the same position that we were the last recession, I don't know that we'd be here today. Well, I do know that we wouldn't be here today. We were just in a much more financial sound position prior to COVID, and having the right people, the CFO and bookkeeper in place that we didn't have around the first recession, that just makes a world of difference.
And again, that's also credit to Eric, because after the first recession, we decided that we needed a CFO, we needed a competent bookkeeper that could kind of help keep track of that stuff. So Jamel's totally right. That's what is helping us to survive right now.
Well, can I ask you real quick? I mean, you guys. I mean, I mentioned I joked up front about being in the garage, but I think So Percussion has a similar trajectory in terms of like the financial collapse in 2007-8 and the fallout from that the next couple years. You know, So was there. We lost a few grants, but we were sort of too small to fail. Like we had 1,000 different revenue streams that were all giving us like $112. You know, rather than having one big $15,000 grant or donor. You know. And since then, we sort of squirted out the other end of that of like, oh man, like I can't believe, like just nobody noticed we were there. Like that's how small we were. And over time, though, we started to being like, man, like we saw larger organizations crumble because they had leveraged themselves against other things. And I wouldn't say it was a conscious effort on our half, but like that trauma of like sitting on the Queensboro Bridge the day Lehman Brothers folded and being like, and hearing people say the stock market might hit zero. And what does that mean? You know, I'm driving to rehearsal like John Cage Matters that day.
Right.
You know, and but that trauma, I think then, you know, 2 years later when So gets a gig, I'm like, well, I'm just going to stick $500 in the savings account. And then we just did that every gig. And we're not like out of the woods by any means, but now I think we're definitely not too small to fail anymore. But I think we had put a few more like floaties on our arms in the last 10 years. Yes. And now that there's a flood, we're sort of like, we're all paddling like the rest of everybody else. But right. It seems like with you all, like the little things that Eric and you all sort of like started to put in place, and you saw where the holes in your ship were, you know, and you patch them. And that, I'm curious if that was like, looking back on it, are you seeing those things? Like, how are you prepping thinking forward now? Like, we're now in another trauma. We'll have another one in 10 years that's similar to this. What are you all thinking of now moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think you know, looking at personnel that we have, I mean, we definitely want to try to keep our core team. I mean, maybe that's what bit us in the butt, because I would just brag to, you know, other people in the industry about how great our team we've assembled in terms of hiring and just, I mean, everyone comes to work on time. Everyone, you know, they're texting each other outside of work. I mean, it's just a really interesting, you know, environment. And in order to, you know, we're trying to do the best that we can to keep that. You know, I know I'm getting off task from
sorry.
But I mean, some of the best things that we have is, you know, we've got a solid bank account going into that. And that's something that we didn't going into the recession. I mean, that's just being honest. You know, we're you know, running as lean as we can in terms of what we kept on the shelf for inventory and, you know, what we paid employees. And now we're you know, hiring the CFO and someone to, you know, look for grants and help us with, you know, loans and stuff like that. Even though, I mean, Eric would say that he's not great at that stuff, but I mean, he's just been clutch. I mean, I don't know any. I think of it being, if this was my business, there's just so much that I wouldn't know, and that's a combination of Eric, you know, taking the initiative to find those things, and on top of it, you know, our CFO helping point out all the things, you know, because it's a network. You know, the more people you know, the more you know.
Well, I'm constantly reminded why I'm not a solo musician. I mean, when I play concerts, like, and I'm over here shitting the bed. I'm just like, oh man, I'm so glad Jason's here, you know. And then the same thing goes in meetings. You know, I'm not very good at PR. I don't know how to use social media properly to advertise for things and build a followership, but Adam and Emily do. And so I'm just really glad that I don't have to think about it. And there's a little bit of solace, and that means that I can use my time and my energy more efficiently on the things that the organization needs me to do, which sometimes is money managing, but is also playing concerts. Like, if I don't do that well, then none of this matters. If you guys are super good at managing your budgets and the CFO's awesome, but your woodblocks crack every time you hit them, the CFO doesn't matter at that point. Like, you know, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we call that putting people on the right seats in the bus, basically. So
Yeah.
we were all in this bus driving down the road, and we got to have the right people, the right mix of personalities, the right mix of interests. I mean, I'll be straight up honest. I even though I was Eric's essentially first part-time and then first full-time employee, like heavy woodworking was like never my thing, you know? So I've never been kind of wired like that where, you know, Jamel came in with that specific intent. And then Jamel has also built employees that were like me, you know, when I was their age in their 20s that, you know, barely knew how to use a cordless screwdriver. And now they're making log drums and they're making wood blocks and temple blocks and tambourines and stuff like that. So and then we have the right mix of personalities. So I think like kind of what Jamel was getting at is we have like an awesome mix of men and women right now that kind of have those different areas of interest and passion and stuff that kind of keeps us all going, keeps us all moving down the road. And like speaking of team right now, like we're not 100%. Like, I mean, Jamel's doing 90% of the manufacturing. Eric is doing some manufacturing. I'm doing all the shipping. I cleaned the toilet yesterday.
Listen, you are going to get no argument from me on cleaning toilets. I believe very strongly. I mean, I'm never going to like have an intern and force them to clean a toilet as their first act with So Percussion, but like I sweep the floors. I haven't done it in a second, but like for the first 10 years of this organization, like if the floors needed cleaned, it was one of us. So I would never ask somebody to do something that I haven't or wouldn't do myself. Like that's a very important thing in terms of building culture in your organization. Whether it be loading a cargo van,
culture and morale.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Jamel.
Oh no, I just agreeing with you. I mean, that's how you build culture. That's how you build morale, and that's how you build trust amongst your other employees. That if you're going to ask them to do something, you should be willing, and should have done it in the past as well.
Can I ask you guys? This is one of the things I mentioned before we sort of got rolling, that it's this time has caused me to sort of reflect on my own process and think of like, all right, what are the hills I'm willing to die on? What are the things that I'm willing to spend money on, like a podcast? I've decided I don't care how much money it loses me because I don't care and I don't feel that way about other things in my life. You know, timpani gigs, they have to make me money. I don't like playing timpani that much. You got to pay me you got to give me money to get me out of the house to play tubs. You know, like that's just the deal. But with podcasting, this has made me realize like, oh, okay, I don't care if I lose money on this. And it's made me sort of like reassess my ethics, my like personal manifesto, my mission of like what I personally want to do. And then how I graft that onto So Percussion, and then how that I'm only 1/5 of or 1/4 of that organization, and then I have to weave those in with everybody else's, and then So has a thing that has to have. We're reassessing what our ethics are, what our mission is, what it is we want to do that doesn't have anything to do with chamber music, like food packing or advocacy in different ways, like. For you all, what on an organizational level? I mean, this is the hot topic right now is like, what are organizations doing? And I understand, I see useful things in all of the approaches, but I'm very curious. The thing I never find useful is when somebody says that there's a binary approach to it. That if you're not doing it this way, then you must be a racist or a bigot or a misogynist. And if you are doing it this way, then you are the second coming of Christ. And I'm like, I know a few people who might have a little more nuance to that discussion. And the way So Percussion, not only, despite what So Percussion wants to do, there are things, like you said, the right people in the right seat of the bus or the ship or whatever it is. Like, our organization is suited to do certain things, and I can have a big impact in very specific ways, and that is different than the way Black Swamp is set up, and the way that you all personally have your own personal. So anyway, my question is not very clear, but I'm curious. maybe we'll start with Tim, and Jamel, get your thoughts on this. How have you personally been sort of reassessing how you interface with the world? And again, I don't care about your politics. I genuinely don't. But I'm curious about how you've been reassessing your own personal views, but then how as an organization that has met, because you're in Michigan. I'm assuming not everybody I'm just going to assume not everybody at Black Swamp sees everything exactly the same way. Because if you did, you would be maniacs and you'd be robots.
Right.
So, long question is over. Tim,
What-
how have you guys been thinking
okay.
about this?
Yeah. Well, I'll start at the end first. Yes, not everybody at Black Swamp sees things the same way politically, religiously, socially.
On
So
food,
we have
what's the
the
best
food,
pizza?
exactly.
Like I'm saying that as a
Right,
jest, but I mean it seriously. Like if
Yeah,
we can't
yeah,
agree
sure.
on whether Chicago style deep dish is even pizza, then why are we going to assume what we're going to do with the police is going to be an easy solution? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
let's try to dig a scotch deeper if we can on this stuff. you
and
know?
and we've had some very interesting lunch table conversations over the last few years. So personally, you said two words that I have actually been thinking about a lot, and that is binary and nuance. Like things are not binary. Just like the example you used, just because you don't use racial slurs doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person or you're not a racist for that matter, as far as systematically or systemically. And then also nuance, like things aren't binary. There's a lot. Things are complicated, and there's a lot going on. So honestly, the last 4 or 5 years, I've been in kind of a very heavy, I guess, research and like personal research and development phase, and that time isn't coincidental. What happened 4 or 5 years ago with the last election, and then the Black Lives Matter movement kind of taking shape. So I've been just doing a lot of introspection. What it means to be a liberal or conservative, what it means to be a Christian, what it means to have some social conscience, and starting to connect these dots and put these pieces together. I am unquestionably fortunate to work with Jamel, to have known him for 15 plus years maybe, and I don't know if our history goes back before we've been working at Black Swamp together, so we knew each other
Since
several years.
2001.
Okay, yeah, so almost 20 years, and then working together. I think Jamel's been with us 15 years, so in that time we've kind of been able to have these intense, sometimes conversations about a whole multitude of things. Yeah, what food we like, politics, religion, race, things like that. So it's been kind of a whirlwind, especially the last, I'd say, 6 to 12 months for me, like really digging in. Not necessarily a midlife crisis, but what I've been told is more of a midlife evaluation kind of thing, like where I fit in with kind of everything that's happening in the world, and how I'm kind of reckoning with being a white male, upper middle class, 45-year-old Christian. So does that kind of get us on the right path?
No. I mean, I don't think. Well, first of all, I want to be very careful here, not to make anybody feel like there's no need for you to ask a question to me about whether what you just said was appropriate. That's how you feel,
Sure.
and the intention here, it's clear to me that everybody here is, the intentions are good. So of course we're on the that was honest, and that's all I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And for me, I've had similar. I have a whole slew of things that I'm like, I think I was wrong about this. I may be wrong about this thing, but I actually don't feel like I know enough to say. So I'll put a pin in it, come back to it later.
Yeah.
And then there's other things I'm like, actually, I think everybody else is nuts, and I'm right on this. And actually seeing whatever it be, it's not been a lot of things, but there's a few things I'm like, oh yeah, I never want to speak to anybody like that. And seeing how that interaction went down reminded me why. And so to me, that's been interesting. For Jamel, where's your head been with all this stuff, and how have you been personally dealing with it? But then how does it intersect with your your Black Swamp's culture and how they're dealing with it?
Well, that's let me see if I can start at A and get to Z. we have a very unique atmosphere at Black Swamp. I mean, the fact that we're smaller, the fact that, we have a lot of people, or, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but the core group of people have worked here for, 10 or 20, 15, 12 years. Even a bookkeeper, CFO have been with us for a long time. So my approach during these times has been different than would it in this Black Swamp specifically than it would have been in any other place that I've worked in the past, because you don't typically talk about race or politics, especially if you are a person of color or Black, it's pretty common to talk about race with other people of color in your job, inside the job, outside the job. But when other people who aren't from that community come around, you button up because you don't want that to get you fired, because if that starts, that's always been the trend in the past. So that's I had tread very lightly in the beginning working at Black Swamp, just because you don't know. People tell you who they are, but then people show you who they are. So you wait until I wait people out to see who everyone says they're a nice person or a nice guy or gal, but I want to see if what they preach is backed up by what they do. And I found it's comfortable and found it okay to speak out more about my experiences that I've had. And that's as it pertains to working at Black Swamp. And I grew up in a predominantly white area. So I've also, in the last 5 years, just come to grips with how I contribute to the Black community as a Black male who has grown up in a white community. How can I contribute to something that there are some experiences, living in, South Side, Chicago, that I didn't have to, experience. So I'm not in touch with that, but I have family or friends who do. And part of what I see that I can contribute during these times is me as a Black person understanding white people and how they feel and how they're going to react to, Black people and other people of color trying to explain this situation. So almost being a mediator in some senses during these times, because I've lived the experience of a Black man. I've lived the experience of a Black man in white culture. So I kind of feel like I've got that go between, and I try to be tolerant. And that's kind of what I've been drawing on during these times is, there's you go to high school, middle school, college with people, and you never, especially I've gone to a lot of predominantly white institutions and done a lot of work in predominantly white spaces, and you can go through those spaces and not talk about race, whereas I can go home and talk about race and have those conversations, these nuanced conversations. I can go to other family members and other people and have these conversations. But what I found, especially during, Trayvon Martin and all these things that have come through the news, that you bring up topics and you didn't know how far apart you were with people that you shared laughs with, people you shared music with. And just because, and it's like, well, yeah, they didn't experience that. And I didn't help because I didn't express my, my displeasure or my my discomfort with family member or, some of their family members that said certain things because I just wanted to, as a Black man growing up in white spaces, just wanted to assimilate and try to be the same, even though I was, had parents who, grew up during, the civil rights time and were denied rights themselves that would tell me, they're not looking at you the same. And I'm just like, well, no, you can't tell me that Billy and Bobby that live down the street, that their parents are going to treat me differently. They treat me just the same, but it's like, no, they don't. and that's, and me not pointing those things out was to no one's benefit. But when you grow up in those spaces, you always want to it's embarrassing to have your parents come into those situations and feel like they have to protect you from those things, or deal with. I mean, the first time I was ever called the N-word was when I was on the playground in middle school or elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So, and having them come in and deal with that was extremely embarrassing. I mean, and I didn't talk about that with a lot of my white friends. A lot of my white friends would say, I didn't know that happened. It's like, yeah, and the principal got involved. I mean, that was a whole deal.
Yeah.
But they would say it's embarrassing to be a black man in that space, when you just want to go and hang out with your other white friends. You don't want to alienate them. So for me, during these times, I've just kind of been taking it as a time to kind of explain that, yes, these are my experiences. Yes, these things happen. And because a lot of white people will look, of my white friends will look at me and say, oh, but you're not like those black people. It's like, yes, I am. I am those black people. I am all black people. So when you say those things and say those, hurtful things about the black community, you're saying that about me as well. So I need you to understand that, and I need you to listen to me as a person who can connect with that community and as a part of that community, and use that as your way in to ask questions. Let's have a open-hearted conversation, because I've known you for 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take this opportunity, because I know where your heart's at, but you just don't understand all of the history, and you didn't have the same talks that I did with my parents. We went to different homes. We came to the same school, but we went to different homes and had different talks, and we had different experiences.
It's amazing to me that, you just hit the nail on the head. Like, people that for 20 or 30 years, your parents, like your grandparent, like the first time I heard the N-word was from a grandparent. And this was a person who taught me how to throw a baseball, and, all of the things, and was fought post World War II, was in the Navy Seabees, like fought the Nazis. Like, so it's just so messy, and this inability, or the fear, I think, of just trying to talk about this stuff is the thing I think that keeps us back most times. I will say a lot of, when I hear people say things about, the Midwest is on fire with, don't go there, there's streets filled with MAGA hats. And I'm like, yeah, you'll see a few. But I'm going to push back a little bit on this idea that the streets are filled with MAGA hat wearing people. And they're like, yeah, but Charlottesville. I agree with you. I don't want us to have the perception that every street is like that, because it's not true. And here, like, I'm going to share my experience. I grew up in a very small rural town, cornfield all around. 2 black people, I think, in my entire high school. The first black person I ever really spoke to was Cliff Alexis, who's a Trinidadian man, who just randomly, because of my high school percussion teacher, Joan Wenzel, brought him. Like, it was like this total happenstance thing, because Joan, being an advocate for the steel band, that was my interface with a black person who sat me down and said, I have scars on my head because a cop beat me. And I was like, why would a cop beat anybody? Like, I didn't know. Like, I never my friend Steph Hanner, her mom was the cop. She would come over to our, like, she would drive by and flash the lights, and we were like, oh my God, it's Miss Hanner, And so for me, that, like, as a 17-year-old kid, that was my first interaction with somebody of, like, I trust her. She brought him. He told me something I don't understand, but I trust him because she brought him. So he must be, okay, interesting. And then years go by, and I meet him again, and I see him again, and then I meet Ray Holman, and then I meet Bugsy Sharp, and then I go to Trinidad, and it's like you have these experiences, but most people don't. Well, not most people, a lot of people don't get those experiences. And when I see people make binary statements or have these tensions of, like, just like, oh my God, if you just played in a steel band for 5 minutes, you won't have all the answers, but the conversation will just be way easier. Like, it's not, the payoff's worth it, I guess. No matter how hard the conversation is, the payoff is worth it. And I'm really, I don't know. I just like these times right now, when you were asking sort of like, we were talking about what we were going to talk about. I'm very, I don't know about you guys, like, I'm very concerned about us as a people, as a community, and our inability to sort of see each other as common ground rather than 2 plots of land that need to sort of convince each other that you need to come over here because your plot of land is rotten. And I don't know. I'm sort of asking here, like I've just tossed a grenade in the room. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know necessarily how to do it, other than clearly, like maybe if everybody worked at Black Swamp, they'd have an easier idea of at least maybe not the right conversation all the time, but like you guys said, you've had stressful moments between each other. Like I've had stressful moments between me and some of my black friends before. They've taught me a lot, but it's not happened on Facebook. It's happened like in a pan yard during a break when I make a joke about something and they sort of all look at me funny, like they know my intent, but I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that was my bad. You know, like that's how it happens, and it's happened to me hundreds of times. You know, but for my poor mom or my aunt or whoever who maybe just has never interfaced, for her, she has that one reaction and it just gets lit up on Facebook, and she's just like, well, I don't want to deal with it at all. They're all crazy. I'm like, Mom, it's no, they're not. But she's, you know, anyway, sorry, that was a long ramble, but
no, I mean, I think it's just so ingrained in our society, that sort of binary nature. Yeah, it's either you agree with me or you don't. Or I saw a video on YouTube that doesn't agree with something you said or I said, so whatever you said or I said is discredited. So I don't know. But I do think, like the adage, like we can agree to disagree, I think is fair to a point too. Like we can agree to disagree on what kind of pizza you like, okay? But we can't agree to disagree on how to treat our fellow human beings. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I just think it's just so kind of infused in our culture, and obviously social media doesn't help. I mean, I go to bed some nights, my wife, and I'm just like pissed off because I saw, one post of somebody, that I know that I just completely 100% disagree with. And it was like, how do we live in the same town and see the same things and listen to the same, sermon or whatever, and like walk away with two completely contrasting kind of ideas.
The same person on my Facebook feed who I've known for years will post something, posted, stuff during the, still does, like, that I agree with about, police or about George Floyd, like all those things. And I'm just like, yes, totally agree. And in the same breath, will post a pandemic video. Like, and I'm like,
that's Jamel.
No.
And I'm just like, but again, it's like I'm trying real hard, again, thinking about the empathy for like institutions. Like I see this as like, it's like, of course I know this person. I know they're not crazy, but this is a symptom of like, if you can in one breath support this thing that's so clearly obvious, that like with George Floyd, and then in the other breath post a video of a woman who's ranting about alien DNA. Mm-hmm. And I'm just sort of like, can we just stop for 2 seconds? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing here, people? Like I don't know. And so when I see, like, when you reached out to do this podcast, I'm just sort of like, sure, let's talk about triangles. I don't know, like, what.
Right. Well, no, yeah, I mean, there's definitely been moments where, after this last 6 or 8 weeks where I'm like, I don't even feel like going into work. Sometimes I don't, I'm able to work from home, fortunately, but it seems like almost irrelevant, sometimes whether not only we're struggling with a pandemic and keeping our business alive and afloat, and then there's just like this massive social unrest that is kind of weighing on the country. So it's like, yeah, why am I going to try to sell a tambourine today? What?
It's hard. It's
like
hard. It's hard to see stuff rationally. It doesn't. You cannot connect one to one. Like the world's on fire because somebody was murdered, and you're like nailing a piece of calf skin onto a very fragile wood hoop. Like that's meanings like that means anything right then. It clearly does, fellas. I'm just to be clear, I love tambourines. I got no hate in my heart for the tambourine.
We understand the perspective, but but it's like, I mean, social media. I mean, I just try to take it with a grain of salt, and then also curate. I mean, my feed to represent. To not live in a vacuum, so I try to have different, legitimate news sources or people that I follow that that aren't just kind of my thoughts and my views, but maybe aren't so wildly, polar opposite. So I try not to live in a vacuum. I think what you're kind of talking about a little bit too is proximity, like being around people that look, that talk, that act different than you, and and I think you can do that online or with even through the business, through the company. I mean, I fully admit it's hard in West Michigan. So I'm at the point now where, okay, how do I start kind of fostering and building some other relationships that aren't necessarily just online, but kind of diversifying in that sense, building some proximity and learning more about experience and so I guess that's kind of.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you something that's sort of just like as if you guys were our teachers for 2 seconds, because one of the things.
Man, I go to school every day with Jamel, man.
One of the things that forced So's hand. I mean, there's the obvious, like, oh my God, we have to figure out the PPP loans, and we got like, we can't tour in the fall. What does that mean? But then we had SoC was coming up, and you guys have been supporting SoC with product and just being involved almost since SoC started, it seems. But all of a sudden now we had to do something that for 11 years is in person, now online. And I was already zoomed out from teaching in the spring, and I thought it was going to be a complete failure. And there's something odd that happens when you have you don't have plan B. There was no option to it was like we had to do it. We had money on the line. We had students who had applied and were like accepted. So, and the thing that it did is it sort of forced us to get better at a lot of things we had been putting off, like recording ourselves at home. None of us are good at that. Editing, playing with a click. I mean, we play with the click a lot, but like teaching students how to play with the click. How do you record at home? How do you do audio or video? What's Logic? What's Final Cut? Like all of these things that are sort of like business necessities for, I imagine, Black Swamp being able to make a YouTube page and like have a video demonstrating your product. Somebody there has to know how to do Final Cut or Adobe or something, right? Those are all things that we never had to deal with. All of a sudden, it was just strange. We had all of this content that we finally were able to work on, and we got out there, and it was like, oh, awesome. Like we can do that. The other thing is it gave us access to students and artists that we wanted to work with before, but had only ever been putting priority on being in the room with. Well, now we can work with people in Trinidad easily because of Zoom and these other things that now we're better at. And there are these tools that I wasn't good at Zoom in April. The idea of collaborating with somebody from Trinidad on Zoom was the farthest thing from my mind at that point. But now I'm better at riding this bike. I don't need the training wheels anymore. And I can collaborate with somebody in Ghana if I wanted to. Okay, sorry for my language. I don't know if your podcast. We're going to put explicit lyrics on this one.
Yeah, right. That's fine.
So for you, so my advice to students right now is like, I have a percussion quartet at NYU that I coach, and they're sort of understandably afloat lost in this fog right now. And I'm just like, fellas, get online. Here we go. We just did it at SoC. Like, there's no, what are you doing? Let's figure it out. And so what advice would you have for people who are in the music industry who are coming up, who maybe want to go the business side of things? Not want to say business side as if you're like, well, I guess I can't play. It's like, no, some people really do enjoy making and building stuff. So if there is a young student who sees what you all are doing and is like, I happen to love making my own wood slats for Xenakis, and I love all this tinkering stuff, what in the world sort of opportunity do they have to look forward to, and how are they supposed to skin this cat in the way that Black Swamp was doing 15 years ago out of Eric's garage?
Well, so basically you're asking, how does someone who's maybe in college or going into college, how do they?
I'm going to ask the dumb question. Black Swamp, let's assume you guys have checked all the boxes. You are now what's called a successful institution. You did it. Congrats, fellas.
That's good to hear.
You have a banner behind you, Tim, that somebody could afford enough to have printed and hung in your office and still pay you in Jamel. So clearly you guys are a success, right? So other people can look at that. I guarantee you people are looking at you guys and feel like what you are doing is impossible, and there's no effing way they would ever have a chance to do it. What would you say to somebody who says that to your face?
Well, we do get that question, when we go to different shows, be it PASIC or NAM, and I think especially when we're looking through resumes and putting feelers out for people, it's always nice. There's a lot of people that say, man, I really want to get into it. And it's like, well, why are you waiting to work for the company to get into it? Why not get your hands dirty now? If you like woodworking, or if you want to start, building your own products, why wait for that company to teach you how to build their stuff? Why not to start build? Because some of the most impressive things is seeing people, they'll attach photos of boats or surfboards or guitars, stuff that they make. It's like, okay, I can get a better gauge of your quality and tools that you've used if you're already kind of making stuff on your own. I think Rustic Percussion, Ryan Langford, he started his.
I was going to talk about that. You stop talking right now.
Take it back, Jamel. We're striking it from the record.
Mine. That's mine. I'll take that. And he just, he didn't wait. He was always a huge advocate of BSP and a fan of us, and always very verbose. He'd come to our booth and just talk. He just bounced from person to person. Just such a likable, great person. But he's a person that just started out of his, not even out of his garage, probably out of his house that he had, and just started making stuff himself that, for his own purposes, making slapsticks and tone blocks. And, that's one of those things that, we get that question a lot where people are like, how do I start? And it's like, why are you waiting for us to teach you when you could learn? You'd be a lot better off learning and making mistakes on your own and then showing us what you've made so far. I mean, you have ideas in your head already of an instrument that you wanted to make. And if you look back at how Eric started the program, he said, or started BSP, he started with, hey, this is something there's nothing on the market that I like playing with, so I'm going to make it myself.
Here's what I would do. Sorry to interrupt. Here's what I would do. If I was applying for a job at Black Swamp, or really felt like my dream coming out of high school was to work for Black Swamp, starting in like 8th grade, I would take metal etching classes. And I would get so good at making beautiful, huge murals on metal, just etching these beautiful things. And then when Eric is like, well, what qualifications do you have to work here? I would go right to the nut of what I think Eric does when no one's looking. When his wife leaves town, when his kids are gone, I think he just gets out a piece of metal and starts etching shit on it. Am I right?
Yes and no. He put in a lot of time.
You bite your tongue, Jamel. That's exactly what he does, and you know it.
Okay, so that's
it.
exactly what. That's
anyway, point is like, look at what the company look at because the people who are running Black Swamp are people. They have. It's clear to me that Eric really enjoys making these beautiful. The shells are all like, that stuff's amazing, and if you can. Anyway, it's just like, look at the skill sets that are required for the job you're doing, and just be good at them. Don't walk in and expect they're going to show you everything.
That's exactly. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim. I've been hogging the mic here.
No, it's cool. No, I was going to use sort of Rustic Percussion and Ryan as an example for all that, because he, just similar to Eric, had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, I think, and also had an idea. And Ryan, he kind of started with these tone blocks or temple blocks, I guess, and he was like, hey, I have this idea. Would you guys mind if I did it? Like, why would we mind? Like, because we had already, we'd known each other for several years. We were kind of friends. I'm like, no, man, you roll with it. And he did, and they look and they sound great. He also has, obviously he's kind of grown up in social media, so he gets that. He's got a cool logo. He knows how to promote himself, and now he's sending stuff, around the world. And I think that is kind of what it takes. You kind of have to have a little bit of drive and spirit and an idea. And then, like you were saying, or we were saying earlier, maybe begin to surround yourself with some people. Like, okay, maybe you're not the most social media savvy, or you don't really understand how that works. You got to find somebody that does. Maybe you employ your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or whatever. okay, I need some help with manufacturing, so I need to sort of start to outsource this or talk to people. And I think Ryan, I mean, again, to come back to that, just because we know him, we've known him for several years, is I kind of done a good job starting to put that together. We do get inquiries a lot about whether we have internships, because if they can kind of come work here. And we have, maybe one in the past, and it was sort of a favor to a friend of a friend type of thing. But it's just kind of hard because even though I think what you were maybe alluding to, we've made it, we're this successful company, and maybe we look larger than we actually are because, right now in the office, I think Eric's still here. I see his car, so he's somewhere, and Jamel and myself. And there's 2-3 other guys that are still kind of furloughed, and then our bookkeeper is kind of coming in on limited time. So, we're really not a huge company. So in order to kind of facilitate an internship is almost too big for us.
It's amazing how, I mean, this is one of the things that I think is interesting when somebody referred to So Percussion as an institution, or they look, we start to get questions about like, and again, it's like, I think they're legitimate questions, but when people start to question like, well, why don't you have this in your organization? I'm just like, have you ever run an organization? Like, right. I agree with you. I wish that we had a policy in terms of there was somebody came in once and was just like, why are all of your receipts not locked in a filing cabinet at least 23 feet away from every non-full-time employee? I'm like, what in the hell are you talking about? Yeah, right. like, get the hell out. No, I can barely play 4 mallets. Like that's, right. I'm not worried. I'm worried about my Reich piece and my left mallet flying out of my hand. I'm not going to measure where my receipts are kept near my intern. Like, do you understand what it takes to run I think people look at organizations and they're like, they assume everybody's Google and that there's right. That everything is like this well-oiled machine. It's like, man, every day Black Swamp doesn't exist tomorrow unless you 3 and your CFO decide to wake up and put your shoes on and come in. Like, that's how fragile all of this is. And so to assume that you guys have like this, when I say you've made it, of course of course you have, you built something out of nothing essentially, but other people don't see it that way. It's hard for me to see it that way. I see you guys. I've known you, Tim, when you were the only contact at Black Swamp. I didn't even know Eric was there. It was just like you and Eric, And it's now to this thing now where I'm seeing advertisements. I'm in like Europe and I see random advertisements for Black Swamp in a very tiny university in the middle of London.
Oh yeah.
That's a symptom of something good, I think. Yeah. So anyway,
cool. I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So you guys have a board though, right?
We do. Yeah.
Okay. So what? Obviously, that's not day-to-day stuff. So what happens in the board room then? Like what kind of decisions or
that's a good
direction?
Prior to the coronavirus outbreak, we were in a process of doing a lot of board development. I mean, initially, you guys don't have a board, right?
Other than
because you're
not really.
You're a for-profit organization or an LLC or whatever it is, but non-profit organizations, for folks who don't know, need to have a board of directors, minimum of 4, at least in the state of New York, it's minimum of 4 people. You have to meet a certain amount of times a year. There's all these rules governing, Robert's
you have
rules
to keep
of
your
order.
minutes and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's all, again, stuff. There wasn't a class of like Robert's rules of order and Messiaen, at Yale when I was there. It was,
right.
You got one, you didn't get the other. And so, but we get together with the board, and initially it's like David Lang, Larry's on our board, some close friends of ours, and it's initially sort of an advisory capacity, and that's still a lot of what they do, but we were sort of transitioning with the help of a development director, transitioning our board into something that's a little bit more fiduciary in terms of, not that they needed to be rich people, but that their mindset was less of a like, hey, you guys need help learning what a budget is, and now we need to have people thinking about how to fundraise to make that budget happen, and so having people on our board who can bring in money is a thing that boards do for nonprofit organizations, and that was something our board never functioned as because I just felt bad having my best friends like Larry Snyder on the board and being like, by the way, Larry, you have to give us $15,000 or you're off the board. Like that's what bigger organizations do. They have what's called a give or get. And if you don't give $20,000, you have to bring in $20,000 from 15 different donors or whatever. And if you don't, you're shown the door, you know. We're not the type of organization that could look any of our friends in the face and ever do that. But we've been growing it, and that's sort of where we're at now. And our board functions to help us strategize mainly. Sort of like we plop down everything we're doing in front of them. They never look us in the eye and say, you need to play Christopher Rouse instead of, you know, Caroline Shaw. What they say is, all of these concerts look great. We think your salaries are too low, and you need to raise those. And we think why is your touring budget so high this year? You know, they'll ask questions of things just to sort of like make sure that what we told them we want to do is what's actually happening. And then they help us sort of think big picture. Like, what do you guys know? This is great. This is 5 years from now, and you're commissioning XYZ person, and you're playing here and there. But what are you doing in 20 years? Like, where do you want to be? We need to be thinking about that too. And so that's pre-pandemic. That was what our board was predominantly focused on. But now during the pandemic, they're all dealing with their own crises too. So we've tried to keep them involved, but also understand that like what an organization can rely on their board for these days is now just different than it was before. And so we're asking them for advice. They look at our budgets. They help us think about, there's a million grant programs out there for specifically COVID relief, and how people hear about them are from various sources. And it's like, because certainly the government isn't helping anybody keep this stuff organized. It's just sort of like a fire hose being sprayed all over the place, and you're just grabbing what you can and hoping not to drown. And so our board has been helping us with that stuff a lot too. So,
yeah, cool. Yeah, I was always been curious. So the four of you are running all like full day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and
playing.
We have an operations director, Shelby Blesinger McKay.
Oh, right.
She's a great percussionist. Has a trio called Troika Percussion. And honestly, having Shelby in the organization, it's like she's a percussionist, and so she's really organized and does all the operations stuff great. But she's also a drummer, so she understands what it is that we're doing. And when we say we are going to play Pleiades, her head is like, where am I going to get 6 timpani? You know.
Right.
Most people, a violinist, wouldn't have any clue, you know. So like, it's a real blessing to have somebody like Shelby in the mix. We have an admin assistant, John Stapleton, who is in there part time, and he sort of helps Shelby deal with just like filing receipts and all that stuff, so that Shelby can help us zoom out a little bit more. But in terms of the day to day stuff, Shelby sort of is the hub, but the four of us are very hands on, especially now, like running SOCI, dealing with gigs, booking, managing budgets. Like Eric and I are checking. Eric just had a baby, so he's been sort of on paternity leave for a second. But, you know, he and I are meeting every couple weeks to determine what SO's drop dead date is. Should the pandemic, like, let's say there's never a vaccine and we have to cancel our spring touring. Like, unfortunately, no matter what people want to think about how awesome it is to be in So Percussion right now, we're also having meetings that are like, well, April of next year it is. Yeah. We're throwing a big party in April if there's no virus vaccine, you know. And so it's like stuff like that we are still very hands-on and I think it's maybe not the healthiest thing all the time, but I think if this thing goes down, I think the four of us want to make sure that it's definitely our fault, and we've looked at every corner of this for every dime that we can to make sure our salaries and our staff are employed. You know, we haven't reduced any staff. We haven't fired anybody. Nobody's on unemployment. And we basically said, like, we'll keep the pedal to the metal until the car slows to a stop.
That's right. Until you run out of gas.
Until we run out of gas.
So how is SOCI done now, or are you like in the middle of it?
No, SOCI's done. It was July 16th to the 26th or something, like it was 2 weeks. And it was awesome. I mean, we had 23 premieres of new pieces that were all remotely collaborated on. And the students all made videos for. there's a program called Soundtrap that was like a database where you could upload a file into online and then edit it in real time there. It was kind of like Google Docs. There's Eric going to obsessively metal etch something in metal, I hope. Where you could sort of like Google Docs, but it was like first like Logic sort of. And so we did a big NC, we did and then all these brand new pieces. And I learned a lot about editing and lining up attacks and all these other things in Soundtrap that were after the fact. But yeah, it was great. I mean, it was totally wild.
So even if there's no vaccine in the immediate future, like, do you see So Percussion going that direction, like more kind of sponsored online performances or virtual stuff? Or
the hard thing for us is the live streaming thing is tricky because we don't all live in the same state. So like I live in Connecticut, and so just like if I wanted to go to New York.
Wait, you're not all in Brooklyn right now? You don't all live in Brooklyn? Oh.
No.
That's disappointing.
Sorry. One guy does. We're Brooklyn-based only by one person. So once Eric moves out of Brooklyn, we have to say New Jersey-based.
I see.
Which doesn't quite roll off the tongue as
it's not as glamorous.
Brooklyn-based does, yeah. Lawrenceville, New Jersey-based, So Percussion. But no, yeah. So it's harder for us to just like show up and do a live stream thing from our show or from our studio. I think also everybody's got kids that are going back to school. My wife works in a church, so she's really worried about getting her parishioners sick. So we've really just been like, let's just get good at the remote thing. Soci was great, and the other thing too is if touring gets canceled in the spring, and we've got this infrastructure that allows us to work and interface with people online, then that hopefully could be a revenue stream for us in the event that something else goes. We're just really hesitant to put all of our eggs in the live streaming basket because there's just no I mean, if one of us got coronavirus, we have to cancel it. It's over for 2 weeks. Your whole program's shot. So
well, just kind of stepping back a bit, like talking about maybe how we have to approach things differently as a company. Like, I think it's now that, since COVID, I think it's sort of similar where we have to think, I mean, manufacturing is one thing. I mean, our wood shop hasn't gone anywhere, but as far as marketing goes and working with artists and educators and starting to feel out how they're approaching performing differently, how they're approaching teaching differently, and then how we can kind of adapt to that. And some of it is definitely why didn't I think of that before, the type of thing, which honestly is the case even with product design and other things with the business. It's like, oh, why didn't we think of that 10 years ago? But, I've done last several years, I do a couple tours a year where I visit schools, universities in a certain area. I take a bunch of gear. I talk about history, little PowerPoint thing. We play through product. Well, obviously I'm not going to be traveling. So how can I put this together as a Zoom presentation or a total video presentation? So kind of starting to work on that type of stuff. I think, Jamel specifically and myself were a little ahead of the game with like even video production. So, I mean, you were right. I mean, Jamel does all the kind of recording and mastering for our sound samples and for our shop videos. I do all the Final Cut editing. There's another guy here, Nathan, who's also pretty involved in the video recording aspect and getting footage. So we do kind of collaborate on that. So fortunately, like doing video type stuff or online content, I think we're already in a better position. We went from using our iPhones, running around taking to video stuff to getting, going through a couple different high def cameras, nice mic setup. And so I think we're kind of ahead of it there. It's just deciding, okay, what type of content do we now need to start working on? Like, PASIC is virtual this year. So how can we, whether we're not even sure if we're going to be involved in that. So, but how can we do something in tandem that sort of.
Are they charging money in the exhibition hall for Zoom?
That I don't know.
Are they charging by square footage again?
I think so. Yeah, there's some sort of. I don't either. I haven't seen it or it hasn't been rolled out yet. Some sort of plan for a virtual exhibit hall and and vendor participation and stuff like that. So
I gotta say, I mean, the initial sort of trauma and shock of the lockdown and feeling like, oh my God, I'm never gonna see people again. Yeah, that sucks to not be in person. But I think when the pandemic happened, I was on my like 83rd podcast, and that felt like, wow, I've done 83 of these. This is crazy.
yeah.
I'm at like 175 now. Like I did 100, and I talked to people because I had been saying I can't do a podcast unless I'm in person.
Right.
Now I've talked to the two of you more today than I have in the prior 15 years of the organization.
Right.
And I think that should say something to all of us that, yeah, this is not ideal. But if we are communicating more right now easily with this, then let's use this as a superpower rather than a kryptonite. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, sure.
let's figure out how to get people face to face. Let's figure out how to you can take people into your shop now and show them how to tuck a tambourine where it's done.
Yeah.
You never did that before, and So Percussion, we can do the same. I mean, people can. I was mixing it at SOCI. I was mixing some of the students' stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be mixing your stuff," and they're like, "What does that mean?" They didn't even know what mixing was.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh," they're like, "My 5 is a little off. My 5 tuplet was a little off." I was like, "Well, I'm gonna be editing here in a second. I can let me fix it." They're like, "Well, but let me show you what So Percussion does." Because time in a studio, it's $1,000 a day. So sometimes you can't afford to just go re-record your 5 tuplet. And so what our engineer does is they go in and clip a little bit off of each one of those hits and scooch them all over. Now it's a 5 tuplet. And I would share my Zoom screen and show them how I did it. And they were like, "Oh, you guys cheat." And I was like, so does Bon Jovi, so does Taylor Swift, so did Queen, so did everybody. Like, we don't do this on stage. Obviously, you try to play your 5 right, but what I'm teaching you now is a different thing, and that was something I never would have done at SOCI. Didn't have the opportunity to, and so it was
I'm pretty sure Meehan Perkins does it right every time, every recording. I don't think they're going in and I don't think they're quantizing stuff.
I think Todd puts a quantizer on Doug when they play live, just so it compresses everything Doug does into like an 8th note grid. So Todd just has a prayer of hanging on. Well, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
So yeah, this is totally off subject. Like you and Todd's sort of online faux
WWF. I think WWF.
Yeah. Right. I think that's the most hilarious thing. Like, have you guys always had that relationship, or is that kind of something that like grew?
It's a good question. Todd founded is one of the founding members of So, and what I've learned now that I'm in my 16th year in the organization is that a lot of the way shit is given in the organization. I don't know how shit is given at Black Swamp. I'm sure it's given in its own unique way in various ways. But at So Percussion, the way people give shit to each other, I think derives from, it's very passive aggressive, very underhanded, like it's always a backhanded compliment, or like, and when I say backhanded, I mean 2 hands, backhanded right to the face. And it turns out Todd is the sort of like pot stirrer in the organization, and he would always do it and then be like, he would point to somebody else, and it would, Anyway, so Todd and I have a very similar sense of humor. I just do it out loud, and Todd is very more under the radar. And so when we would hang out at, if former members of So would play with us, or we'd do Pleiades or something, and we'd cross paths a bunch, and Todd and I would always end up sitting together and just howling, making fun of everybody else at the table. Just the mockery of Adam Slawinski when me and Todd are in the room. Poor Adam. I mean, I owe that man my life, because but so online, I think Todd and I just really love I hate when people I think it's important that people take your tambourine role seriously. It is true that you need to have a good one in order to get in the Cleveland Orchestra. I also think it can be true that it's hilarious that we spend so much time on a tambourine roll that we'll invest in beeswax, and we'll invest in sandpaper, and there's arguments, and there's whole we call them labs at PASIC. I don't think they're unimportant, but I also think it's true that it's funny. And so I want us as a society to be able to hold those two thoughts in our heads equally and know that they're okay to be there. And so Todd and I and Todd's whole like MO with his videos is just ruthlessly mocking everything.
Yeah.
Whether it be his own students. Like, have you seen the videos where he's like, the kid's got a backpack on and it's all about the excuses you give when you're in lessons?
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, I had it last week. Can we just talk? I just really need to talk to you about something. Like those
Right.
lessons. And I don't know. That's where I really enjoy Todd.
My favorite, I've told him this before, is when he's had his kids in videos and he sort of chooses kids out. You know, what happened to my Vic Firth, mallet, version mallet, and they're just sitting there looking at him like, we have no idea what you're talking about. Or he had the board meeting with all the stuffed animals and stuff. So
Well,
I think it's hilarious.
I don't know if you know his wife, Jessica, but if you ever are in their house, it's very clear that Todd has, and rightfully so, like Todd, like it's Jessica is the smartest person in the house. And then it's Jack and then Luca, maybe they're fighting for second place. And Todd is just like, those videos are like, nobody wants to play with Todd. So he's just has a camera setting up in his house. Like, and now he's doing all the ones where he's like cooking or slicing watermelon, like.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's one of my favorite people on the planet. And he's a really good teacher. And I think it's worth sometimes us all laughing at ourselves a little bit. So.
Well, and we definitely run the gauntlet here at work. And I know Jamel is my Todd Meehan, and I am his Adam Slawinski, if that makes sense. So,
Good, you keep that up, Jamel.
Yeah, he claims that I'm I'm an easy target. So, and I could take you, but we definitely, there's definitely a sort of air of it's camaraderie, but it can also there's a lot of making fun of each other ruthlessly.
I don't know about you.
It's definitely.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, it's definitely, and everyone gets it. I mean, you can almost say that's kind of the initiation when someone starts working here, is when you start getting made fun of. I mean, you can't wear any new item of clothes without it being pointed out. As Tim comes in with shorts. He never wears shorts during the summer. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've seen your knees. Like we call it running the gauntlet because you're going to get beat up because when if Eric hears me, teasing Tim, then he's going to jump on, and it's just a pile on.
There's all this stuff. I totally agree that we shouldn't bully people. Like, you need to be appropriate, all of that stuff. But I also don't trust organizations or people who won't give each other a little shit. Because there's a reason for it, I think. Like, running an organization like you all run, it's not easy. You have to learn to do a million things that you didn't set out to learn and you maybe don't even want to learn. And so if you can't take someone calling out the fact that your knees are showing, and I've never seen them, then this is going to be a long ride. Do you realize how shitty this job is and how little pay you get? Like, come on now. Like, So Percussion, it's like, I'm going to give Adam crap ruthlessly, or people who are subbing with us or playing with us. It's like, bro, we're going to be loading a van at 4 a.m. Like, I need you right now to be able to deal with this. Otherwise, you're going to crumble. And it's, again, not always healthy. In fact, rarely is it a healthy thing to lead with that all the time. But I think being able to deal with a little bit of friction like that amongst your colleagues is probably healthy.
It's healthy for sure. And there's definitely things that have happened 8-10 years ago that still come up almost on a daily basis. Just
never goes away.
It's funny, but
well, hey, I unfortunately have to go get a COVID test, not because I'm sick, but because a venue that we're playing next Friday is requiring me to have a COVID test.
Okay.
The results aren't going to come back for 15 days, so
it's pointless.
Who knows? I don't know. We're living this like I don't know. I got this email from the venue, and they're like, "You need to have this COVID test within the prior 9 days." And I said, "Well, they told me 8 to 15." They're like, "Well," I was like, "Well, I'm going to show up. So if you don't let me in, that's on you. But I will have had my COVID test. Welcome to Chaos 2020." I don't know what to tell you. But I got to go get that knocked out. But guys, it has been really nice to catch up with you, and I hope that this podcast turned out okay for you all to use. I know I used some language that, I hope your adult listeners have heard, but I know that there's students involved, and I don't ever want them to feel weirded out. But it's been awesome to talk with you all. It's really nice to hear other people not have all the answers, but have had thoughts and sort of you're in a similar, we're in different boats, but the same storm. And it feels nice to sort of talk with you all about it.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I know we've been kind of going back and forth probably for a couple months, like trying to kind of figure this out.
There's some stuff going on. It's all right.
Oh, yeah. So, no, it's great to talk to you. And so thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. It was great talking to you.
Well, and on my end, if I would love, I know you guys do different people all the time, but my door's always open if there's anything you ever want to chat about, something new you guys are releasing, some new initiative you're all doing, even if it's just hop on for 10 minutes and chat, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay. I mean, my question is, I saw you guys do a prepared cactus during the NPR Tiny Desk concert. I'm waiting for you guys to do some kind of prepared pet animal. Because I just think that, but completely in the So style, like I just want like the dog to whimper at the right time, or a bird to chirp at the right time, or you're playing on a turtle's shell, a live turtle or a tortoise.
No, we haven't used live tortai, but is tortai the plural of tortoise?
It is now.
Sure, we'll go with it.
We'll say it is. My final story here, just to show you, we have used dogs. I have anyway. I had to learn how to use Final Cut, not just for So, but because my wife's a pastor and she had to make church services every Sunday, and so I had to help her film them at home, and I didn't know how to use Final Cut, so I took films of my dogs hitting bongos, and then made a Law and Order theme song video with like boom boom boom, and Sasha's playing the clave, the stick click, clack, boom boom. You know. So it was just like, I gotta learn how to do something, so I just filmed them for 2 seconds hitting bongos, and I'll send it to you. It's really telling of my process. That's awesome. And where I've come. So,
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you're all doing well. Tell Eric I said thank you for letting me have you this hour and a half here. I hope it didn't kill the productivity there at the office, but it was fun.
Yeah, we're all good. Thanks,
Thank you very much.
All right, take care, you guys. See ya.
Bye.
This has been a BSP production, recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion home studios. Audio and production assistance by Jamel Taylor and Nathan Coles. Intro and outro music by Adam Hopper.